As a performer, your body is there.
Hi, I'm Mad Kate, and you're listening to S.W.E.A.T, Sexuality, Work, Extraction, Art, Theatrics. S.W.E.A.T is a series of conversations about performance and performativity of the sexual and sexualized body at work, where work is broadly defined as the labor of survival, the labor of care, creativity, and capital A art. How exactly do we define our work? And how does that work entangle and circumscribe our sexual identities, our creative lives, and the ways in which we provide care? How do we perform? Tasks, acts of care, and identities. Anchored in our always already racialized and sexualized bodies, our complex intersectionalities, these conversations are a means of relating through work to each other. I hope that they contribute to dialogues which normalize sex work as work and all work as deserving of respect, healthy conditions, and a living wage.
Part of a drag performer's creative practice is not getting beaten up on the way to and from work. That's not normal. That's weird. And people don't know that we experience that because it's so normal for us that we forget to sort of mention it.
Welcome, dear listener, to a new year in which we make artful, joyful sounds and loving communities, and do so within context of war and violence and fires raging. And we do it anyway, while we are fighting, because we must. And welcome back to a fourth season of S.W.E.A.T. I've learned so much over the past 3 seasons of doing this show. It's been such a pleasure to learn through deep and active listening to my guests, taking in their wisdoms. I've also learned a lot about doing interviews and what I'd like to explore more deeply in this podcast series. So this season, I'd like to dig deeper into the word performance, what it is to perform, what it is to be authentic or fake, where we fear and why we fear fakeness and false identity, while simultaneously loving to cloak, hide, put on filters and masks. I also intend to challenge myself to have more exchange and to ask my guests to come with their own questions, those urgent questions we wake up with, so that we can tease them out together. So as we enter into season 4, I'm very excited to present someone I've wanted to talk to for a while, and that is Queen of the Heavens and of the Earth, Empress of Despair, and architect of your eternal suffering, Olympia Bukkakis.
I think that there is a lot to be said for highlighting the commonalities between certain trans experiences and those of non-trans people, because the far right has a vested interest in making us seem like we're particularly different to other people.
Olympia Bukkakis is a drag queen, choreographer, moderator, and writer living and working in Berlin. She's inspired by the tensions and intersections between queer nightlife and contemporary dance and performance. So one thing that I've been busy with thinking about is, what is performance? What is it to put on another identity? And I think obviously it relates a lot to drag. And what is drag? Is drag putting on another identity, or what is drag to you?
So I have like a trademarked Olympia Bukkakis response to both of these questions. So I was on a date once and this person asked me, what is performance? And I just kind of like off the bat just came up with the definition, but so far it continues to work, which is that performance is when you exist but on purpose for a discrete period of time. So it has to have a beginning and an end. So like to clarify that a bit more, as like social animals, we are always performative. We are always existing in relation to others. It's just that we can't do that on purpose, like fully intentionally, full time, because it would just like drive us mad, right? So we have these like ritualized moments where you are existing on purpose, like, you know, maybe like 80% on purpose, like consciously, intentionally, and that has to have a beginning and an end. And that makes certain things possible that are not possible in like regular, like ritualistic situations. And then, so my definition of drag is when you have a gender, but on purpose for a specific period of time.
Beautiful.
So I think it's really about like intentionality, and that's definitely like, it's really porous as well, because like a performance is very often, like a performance in a theater, we know very clearly when it starts and stops. But with drag, it's like a little bit more porous because you're still kind of like performing when you're off stage as well. It's this very sort of like in between space when you're like standing in the crowd watching someone else do a show, but you are in drag.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like this idea of it being circumscribed by intention or time. It makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like drawing a circle in the beginning of a ritual and saying, now the ritual will begin, enter the circle, now it's begun, and then closing the circle again.
Exactly. I think like performance, like pretty much all performance grows out of ritual. Like, so you have like, the so-called Western theatre starts, like has its origins in Greek tragedy, which was taking place at this festival for Dionysus. And then there's theories about where the chorus and the actors and stuff come from. Also, dance definitely comes out of ritual. So, I mean, my secret theory is Mine sort of like...
Love a secret theory.
It's like, this is like, I'm like, I don't want to call myself an edge lord, but my edge lady theory is that like drag performers are like a ritualized third gender in Western societies, but I don't think people are really ready to hear that.
Oh, that's it. That's
including a lot of drag performers. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting to think about third gender, because I guess like even the idea of third gender makes me uncomfortable. This morning I was thinking to myself, and I was thinking about this idea of non-binary, and I was like, I relate to it, but I think I relate to it more like not binary as opposed to non-binary as a kind of identifier, which I feel like in mainstream context has become some kind of third gender. It's like a way to interpolate it into some kind of mainstream understanding. And I was like, no, I really have difficulty with this because I feel like we have so many multiplicities of genders. Yeah, so this is just like my spiraling thoughts around multiplicities of genders, but maybe it loops back into what you're saying around drag. I think in a mainstream context, again, drag is often looked at still in binary terms. How do you fit in gender and drag when we have so many genders? Or what, I mean, how do you feel about multiplicities of genders?
Well, I was just discussing this with my therapist today.
Great.
But I mean, like, I got into drag because I really wanted to perform, and I didn't feel able or willing to present an intelligible gender. The last, like, theatre role that I played was John Proctor in The Crucible, and he's such, like, a moany bitch.
Wait, I think I read it when I was 13. Can you remind me who he is?
So it's like this parable for McCarthyism in the US, but basically he is the upright man. He has committed the sin in that he has slept with Annabelle, who is one of the teenage girls who, like, confessed to having been a witch and then is accusing all of these other people. He refuses to, because, this whole thing is like, if you say, yes, I am guilty, then you get spared, like by the, this like local kangaroo court or whatever. But if you say, I am innocent, then that is proof that you are guilty, and then you will be executed. So all of these upright people, morally upright people, then say, like, I am innocent because they are innocent and they won't lie, and then they get killed. But, like, he's just, like, running around just the whole time. Oh, my God, he's so annoying. I'm like, I think that there should be, yes, McCarthyism is bad, and we know this because we live in Germany today.
Right.
But also, I would much rather have been playing Annabelle, this, like, evil bitch who's like getting all these people killed because she's like lives such like a repressed life as this Puritan girl, and she finally has this moment to like exercise this agency on the people around her. So basically I was not interested in playing male roles, but male is the sex that was assigned to me at birth. And it was like 2005 or 6 or whatever, and I was like, drag was the only performance form that like didn't force me to present an intelligible gender. So I could just say, like, I am Olympia, it's she, and there was like a social sort of scaffolding that would allow people to see me in a way that felt comfortable and would allow me to perform. So, like, I think you can, and lots of people have talked about how drag, that it does function as like a playground for people to like work out who they are, which is really cool. But what I really like about it is it's ceremonial. You put it on, you take it off. And who you are doesn't really matter as much when you're doing it.
Do you feel like that's still legible, that when audience members watch drag shows like Drag Race, they're becoming more accustomed to understanding that they're seeing a playground of different kinds of genders on stage?
It really depends on the scene. So, like, I would say in the Berlin international scene, it's pretty normal. Yeah, for people to just, like, not make certain assumptions about what the actual identities of the people who are performing are. Yeah, so I think it really depends on the scene. RuPaul's Drag Race is, like, broadly, like, in the beginning it was framed as, like, we are taking in, like, men, and then they dress as women. And then, of course, because like lots of trans people are attracted to drag, like myself included, then they start to come out. And then the show has to deal with that because it was always a fiction that drag is about men dressing as women. Why would gender be so simple in an environment where the whole context is playing with gender, right?
Right.
So, and I think that the fandom is like more progressive than the show on that. I go to a lot of different places, and these small scenes that maybe started in the last 5 years tend to have pretty progressive gender politics. The thing that I'm really interested in is like what happens in the drag bar is that you go in, you've never, been there before. You go in and you see what you think is like a 60-year-old man in a wig lip syncing to Cher, pretending to sing along to Cher. And then the people that are next to you explain to you that no, that is, well, in my case, her name was Miss Candy. It's like, that's Miss Candy and she's an absolute icon. And you know what? She's singing. And you learn through the interactions with the other people in the space to like accept what you previously thought would be like absurd ideas and to learn that actual social realities are more malleable. And I think that that is like the really core thing that I love about drag. That it's just like you have a little bit of autonomy in terms of like understanding what's going on around you when it comes to like gender or authenticity.
That's beautiful. It makes me wonder how to get more people into those spaces to kind of be able to experience that.
I feel like if I would, so I started doing drag in 2009. Oh my God. And recently someone was like, when did you start drag? And I was like, oh yeah, 2009. And he replied, oh, when I was 4. And I nearly passed out. It's like, I've been doing drag longer than some adults who have been alive, I think, right? If I knew then how far this would have spread in that time, I would have been so shocked. I mean, I think lots of people are coming into contact with this. And I think that's really exciting.
Will you tease out a little bit more about being trans and doing drag?
Yeah. The relationship between transness and doing drag is basically just one of cause and effect for me. Like, I think drag is like a really useful technology for many trans people. Many trans people discover themselves through doing drag. Also, I mean, what has happened more recently is that it's been set up in some people's minds that there is this binary between like people who are trans and they access like medicine, like hormones or surgeries, etc. And that's like an authentic transness. And then there is drag, which people do for fun. And that's about like wearing the clothes of the so-called opposite sex or changing your voice and adopting sort of like mannerisms and stuff like that. And actually, a lot of transitions involve both of those things or things from either one of those categories that you wouldn't expect, right? So, like, I mean, there's plenty of cis people that are having a lot of gender-affirming surgery.
Yes.
This is like cosmetic surgery in general. There's also plenty of cis men who are taking tea so that they can have bigger muscles. That's literally what steroids are.
Right.
And then there's plenty of trans people. In fact, the vast majority of trans people don't have, and despite the fact that they should have this, don't have access to medical transition because it's expensive or they're in a prohibitive environment. So many trans people have absolutely nothing to do with drag and want nothing to do with drag. But I think that a lot of the things that we understand as being drag are also useful technologies in transition. And that is like a conscious and stylized gendered self-presentation and adoption of gendered gestures and speech and stuff like that. So for me, they're really tied. I mean, for me, they're inextricable. But that's just because there is no version of me that is not a drag queen, you know? But I think to ask about like authenticity, I mean, I think that the really nice thing about drag is that like there's no such thing as authenticity in drag. So I think, I mean, this is me being like a massive boomer, but I'm like quite interested in like binary drag. Like when people who have like very unusual and new gender presentations outside of drag then get into drag and they're just like a beautiful woman or a beautiful man. Like, because it's like, that's where you get this like old camp irony, right? But then there's lots of younger people who have like, and like not just younger people who have like drag personae that are they thems outside of drag and they're they thems in drag. And yeah, I mean, I think that's just part of the development of the art form in its social context. Yeah.
Do you think that a they them out of drag has to be a different they them in drag? Like, does drag require difference?
I don't know. I think a lot of people, even people, if they're like a woman out of drag and then they're a drag king, a lot of these people will also say that the difference between a drag persona and them is more just the intensity. It's just turning up the volume. So I really don't know, actually. And also, this is me trying to be humble. I'm pushing closer to 40 and like a lot of the really intense and fast-paced, exciting innovation that's happening in drag is happening by people in their early 20s. So I'm just not as in touch with some of the really cool and interesting stuff that's happening, new stuff that's happening in drag. So I would also put a caveat on there as to the limitations of my knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, myself included. This kind of loops back to something you were just saying, which I also think is really interesting, sort of tying in, gender affirming surgeries or technologies for cisgendered people. So I'm nearly 46 and I'm kind of in perimenopausal. I'm assigned female at birth. And I am starting to notice like how my hormones are changing, how it's affecting my body in different ways. And I'm starting to talk to older as well, assigned female at birth persons who are doing different kind of hormone replacement therapies and considering if that's something that I would be doing, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's interesting how that conversation has never quite been explicitly linked to queer conversations around hormone therapies. At least not quite yet. It's maybe starting to. I've talked to a few people my age who have experimented with tea and noticed how it affects. It kind of puts them right into perimenopausal conditions. That's kind of a separate convo, but it's just like for the first time I'm starting to see some of those things linked. Parallelly, I'm watching my kid assigned female at birth who identifies as she, her, they, them, and her like getting ready strategy in the morning, which is already she's still like preteen, but already like 2 hours long
Okay.
to kind of show up at school in the in the gender that she would like to present. And I kind of wonder, is that ritual also a drag ritual? Like for a cisgendered person, getting into their own, upping the volume of their own cisgender, is that a drag ritual?
Well, RuPaul famously said in the early 90s, you're born naked and the rest is drag. And this is like around the same time that Butler's looking at gender performativity and stuff like that. I would say I wouldn't call that drag because I think drag is like, I do actually also relate drag back to queer subcultural performance, like that it does come from certain communities that create that. But I think it's extremely important and useful and illuminating for us to understand how similar those processes are. So if your child is spending 2 hours getting ready to go to school, that is similar to the fact that I spend, well, I should be 2 hours, but I spend 1 hour getting ready to go to work. And that is different to, say, my colleagues in the dance field, because I work mostly in contemporary dance, who, are like a little bit of mascara and some blush if it's like a really important performance, and then they go on stage. So like in that, me and your child have more in common than me and my colleagues in dance do. So there is, and I think also what you talk about, this relationship between hormonal transition and menopause and perimenopause. There's this Jules Gill Peterson is this really interesting trans academic who I listened to speaking on the Dig podcast. It's an episode on trans kids, and she pointed out that like if we're like sex is like much less clearly defined than the people who hate us would like to think. That's because they're not actually even interested in what sex is. But like, there are many different markers to like what biological sex is contested among biologists, right? Or what, like
Right.
whoever that, like endocrinologists, etc. So one of the markers is like hormonal like balance. There's also like primary sex characteristics such as like genitals, secondary sex characteristics like positions of fat and muscle on the body, etc. So like there's a whole bunch of other things, and there's chromosomes, and these like very often don't line up in terms of how we expect to produce the kind of people that we think they would produce.
Right.
But if we're talking hormonal sex, then every person who survives past puberty has undergone a sex change.
Right.
So like children do not have the same sex hormones that adult men and women or males and females or whatever do. And in fact, many trans people that do undertake hormonal transition describe it as second puberty because it is.
Right.
And then for also cis women who are not having like HRT and go through menopause are also experiencing in this understanding of biological sex another sex change. So I think that there is actually a lot of capacity for building solidarity around experiences of the body changing, given that everyone has that experience.
Absolutely.
And like it also helps us explain why none of the hormones that like trans people use to transition were developed for trans people.
Exactly.
Like these were all developed for cis people who use them in various ways, right? So I think that there is a lot to be said for highlighting the commonalities between certain trans experiences and those of non-trans people, because the far right has a vested interest in making us seem like we're particularly different to other people.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, even just the process of living, as you say, like going through your first puberty, as well as, when you get older in all genders, you kind of are anyway, despite ourselves, like transitioning, right? Despite what we might otherwise desire or how much control we'd like to have, our bodies are doing its own thing. I wonder.
Yeah, and also like people who sign male at birth, apparently, rather than going through like a menstrual cycle over over around 28 days or so, right? Apparently people who sign male at birth are going through like a pretty big cycle, but it's like in 24 hours.
That's
So,
what I just learned about. That literally came up like 5 days ago for me.
Yeah. So even though I pointed out that that menopausal women are experiencing another sex change, you could also argue that people who sign male at birth are like every 24 hours, like a full rejuvenation. So like they're like I think. I actually just applied for funding to make a piece about this with Maria Scaroni. It was going to be called Unsex Me Here, which was about what happens when the witch allies with the queen, and the witch being like the menopausal woman and the queen being like the drag queen trans femme.
Oh, that's marvelous.
Yeah. So like I think you're onto something very interesting.
Oh, this is great. Well, I hope that you get the funding, first of all, and I would love to see how it develops.
The funding body we applied to does not exist as of the 1st of January, so we are not getting the funding, but we're probably going to make the piece anyway.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, Germany's just seen massive funding cuts. So you with some people, I guess, together, I don't know, you can tell me about the origins of this. You started something called DRAG, Drag Resources Action Group. Is that what it stands for?
Yes, that's right.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about why it's needed in our community, speaking of funding and payment?
Well, I mean, the reason I got into working in dance, I guess, is because I wanted to make longer form stuff and work in theatres and stuff, but also I just wanted more money. I was so like, my monthly budget while I was supporting myself through uni was like, €800 a month. I mean, that's nuts. And like I was doing gigs for like €50 very regularly. And then basically when COVID hit, I basically just stopped performing in drag for a while. But in that time, standard fees went up to 100, then they went up to 150. And I thought that was really cool. And then I just, with some of the funding that I had, like research funding or whatever, I was like, I could also just use this to, now that pressure's taken off a bit, I could initiate this thing just to see if people are interested in organising. I was also in a group called the Work Culture AG, which was part of the ZTB, Zeitgenössische Tanz Berlin, Contemporary Dance Berlin. And we together over like I think, quite some time, developed some guidelines for best practice for funded contemporary dance in Berlin. And I thought this could work in drag. I mean, we couldn't set as like ambitious norms or targets for that, but we could set like a bare minimum. And then the more I think about it, the more it's kind of crazy that it's like, you know, everyone involved in like drag environments has like, you know, they have their own material interests. But no one except drag performers has drag performers' material interests 100% in mind, which is not to say that everyone's fucking us over or whatever. But like, there's a lot of things that audiences don't even know that we go through in order to make the shows that they love, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, I always say, like, part of a drag performer's creative practice is not getting beaten up on the way to and from work.
Yes.
Like, that's not normal. That's weird.
Yes.
And people don't know that we experience that because it's so normal for us that we forget to sort of mention it. So I called a meeting as part of this, like, I won with Get Fucked, this event that I do, the Tag der Clubkultur, the Day of Club Culture award. And we had to put on a day event. And as part of it, I was like, let's do this, like, this meeting about working conditions. And people came and they were interested. And then we met every 3 weeks and drafted these recommendations for best practice. So we want to raise the minimum to 200 and to recommend that people or organisers or venues either offer some form of backstage or pay for taxis to and from the venue. And, you know, a lot of this stuff is already happening. But also through this process of working on that, I mean, for one of the events that I do, Get Fucked in Hasenheide, I was paying 150 because that was standard. And then someone brought up that it was just like, it's just not enough. So like not in relation to like my event, but they were like, we just can't live off 150. And so then through sort of like juggling some stuff around, then I've put up my fees for that show. So I've also like learned a lot from it. It's really great. We've been working as a collective for, I guess, just over a year.
It's amazing.
And we've got the guidelines published. We've been in discussions with with one bar. We're all, like, most of us are also event organisers, so we can already implement those guidelines in our work, and we want to make them more of a norm for everyone else.
That's fantastic. As a performer working for 20 years in the Berlin scene and starting in clubs, it's great to see that there's finally a movement on this. And I think there's some really important things that you covered around, getting to work safe, which might mean taking a taxi there and having that covered. I think that's absolutely important, especially because of the hours we work. I think also having rehearsal time. I know that, I mean, some drag performers may even contest this, that like somehow something beautiful is born out of like flying off the seat of your pants, kind of coming up with the show last minute, or not having rehearsal time, or, you know, doing it for the first time on stage. But I would also argue that having some rehearsal time and feeling like you're being paid for it, and also ideally, potentially even having a dramaturge, being able to pay someone else to be an eye, could also be a really beautiful thing to also provide some more safety, for lack of a better term, to, you know, to say, okay, what is the material I want to show on stage? And if I have a second eye, they might be able to flag something that's maybe that needs like a trigger warning, or maybe that's just not an idea that's really been thought through all the way. Maybe you could improve it in this way that makes everyone feel better about this. Not to get away from like making provocative shows, but I would just say more like critically informed shows. And also like training. I think at least for me, I felt for many years that I couldn't even afford to take dance classes, and that I would just justify it by saying, okay, well, I have to gig literally 3 times to 4 times a week because I'm being so underpaid that like whether it was like go-go dancing or stripping or doing a show, that was how I was doing my training. But outside of that, I couldn't actually take classes. So, and these are just a few things. I mean, then you have costumes, you have, other expenses that go into creating a show. You have just like thinking time that you need. You need downtime to put something into creating a show. So I feel like there's just so many aspects where we need to be compensated for that, because I think at this point, in Berlin, I don't know what I would say is a living wage, but something like 1,200. I don't as like as a living wage. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's possible. This is also the difficult thing, is that like you can really, if you have to, you can get by on like less than you think you can.
Right.
But like really, I think in order to have like a stable life where you can think about something other than financial precarity, like 2,000 is like the beginning figure.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that's hard to get from nightlife. I think I never got anywhere close to that from working just in drag.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as you point out, like once you start to count all of the things that your performance fee is supposed to pay for, it's like you start to understand why it is that you're so stressed all the time.
Yeah.
And then not to sort of like get too gloomy about it, like people who stick with it, it produces really impressive performers, because you just have to be.
Yes.
And also, I mean, when I first started working in dance, people would often say to me like, wow, you're such a good performer. And I felt like really insecure. Yeah, I was just insecure because I hadn't studied dance as a child and all of this sort of stuff. And I didn't really know what they were talking about. And then I realized, in contemporary dance, like for many people, it's like you rehearse for like 6 weeks to 2 months. You perform the show like 4 times.
Yeah.
And very often that's the last time you ever perform that show. Because Wiederaufnahmeförderung, like restaging funding, is like really hard to get. So people just don't get practical training in terms of like being on a stage. And in drag and like other forms of like nightlife performance, you really, really have it. Like you really know what you're doing with an audience. And I think there's something to be really proud of in that. But at the same time, classes, I mean, one of the recommendations that we included is that where it's possible, if the venue can make the space available at no charge for a rehearsal, then we do recommend that. But we also recommend that like a lot of drag is happening in spaces organized by people, like run by people who are not making any sort of real profit, and for whom it really is a labor of love, like small drag bars and stuff like that.
Right.
Which is not to say that's all people. So we've really tried to strike a balance in terms of setting some basic standards. So like we articulate that it's like that we, and particularly people who have like dedicated their lives to this scene, deserve more.
Right.
But this is like a base. And like one of the things that we've included is that until the middle of this year, for small community venues, we accept 150 as a minimum fee, because we don't want to set up this sort of like oppositional thing. Sure, there are bad actors out there in the scene, but it's not the rule. And we want to work together, because like I'm a communist, so I definitely believe in like workers agitating aggressively against bosses. But I think a benefit that we have in the drag scene in Berlin is that there are lots of people that share similar values, and that we have a lot to gain from cooperation before we would need to get to confrontation with anyone. So we're really optimistic about that. But regardless of how anything turns out, we need to be sort of organised and well informed as drag performers, so that we can really sort of like secure some basic conditions, which are really, really modest, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's not to say we won't be asking for something more radical tomorrow.
I mean, listening to you speak, I'm wondering if it could be, well, not as simple as, but like maybe one of the stones in this long path is, well, I'll back up. First of all, I absolutely agree with you that I don't think there's a lot of intentionally bad actors, except for Vattenfall. but because you have these overhead costs of things. It's like no one ever argues like how much is the electricity. You can't argue with these people.
Yeah.
But I think in general, it's just a very difficult economy, right? It's hard to actually cover all the costs of a drag show, including all the labor, in a fair way. And, the fact that, like, of course, as performers, we want to support other performers and see those shows. But actually, the economy of having to pay a ticket price that would help to make the whole thing run better is beyond our means because we're underpaid. So it's, this negative cycle. So it's difficult. So we have like that as a base problem. But we also have these like small clubs, which are forgiving environments, I guess, for the most part, although maybe that could be even more radically shifted where, we kind of say, listen, in theater terms, this is a general admission to the Generalprobe, the dress rehearsal night, because like, I think like often these shows, even if they have been seen before, to produce a really fully polished show, you kind of need to run it 10 times and then come out for the premiere. And a lot of performers are doing something that's maybe never been seen before. And in these small clubs, we are actually giving the opportunity for quote unquote failure. We are given the opportunity for making mistakes. We are giving perhaps the possibility for feedback, although I don't think that that's necessarily always framed in that way. So audiences do come and expect something polished, and they don't necessarily get to have feedback in a gentle and forgiving way and like talk to drag performers afterwards like, that was great, maybe you could do this next time. I'm thinking maybe these processes could be more formalized. I don't know if that'd be too artsy for the drag scene.
I mean, I think that's cool. I want to do a show soon called Olympia Bukkakis' Masterclass, where I work with a performer who is older than me, and they just like do a number, and then I sit them down and interview them about it. So it's me that's getting the masterclass.
Yes.
So like, I'm very interested in like these like experimental formats, and I think that there is an appetite for them for sure. I mean, also like contemporary performance and dance audiences, many of them are very interested in drag. And so my entire career is that overlap, right? I think one of the things that we're also trying to do is to educate and like to get audiences to understand like the value of what they're paying for versus what they're getting. Actually, it doesn't make sense and isn't fair to pay €5 to then have 5 people who have put themselves in physical danger, have learned all these specialized skills with probably with like no help, and that at the very least are providing you with an occasion, a reason to be around a bunch of other queer people.
Right.
Like that's not nothing. And then there's like how good the show is. And also, you're right, like it is definitely like a place to experiment and have fun. I personally think that is more socially useful as an art form. Like when people are involved in art that is like living and fails and in the process of being made than the traditional theatre setup. I think that's more socially dynamic and interesting, which is not to say that I like think it produces better work, but in terms of like what it produces in societally, I think is really cool. This is why drag tends to be such a politically engaged medium. But at the same time, very often you go in, you see drag shows and you see stuff that is like so polished, so incredibly well put together. And then again, it's like, I think we're just trying to get people to understand, especially like when the economy's doing poorly, and by like you mentioned, like it's like the economy doing poorly. I mean, it's like as the rich are stealing more and more from us every day.
Yes.
And like intentionally like immiserating and impoverishing us. Yes, it's difficult to say you should be spending your, in real terms, lower wage on this. But like, I could understand that if drag shows were like €30. But we are arguing for a minimum entry price that's pegged to 1 hour of the minimum wage. And that's like, some people are finding that difficult to process, I think. But the minimum wage has gone up like, it didn't exist when I moved here. It was like $7.50 when it started, right?
Yeah.
And it will continue raising. And 1 hour's work to see a show is actually like a really good deal, especially if that show involves you being in this like fun queer environment. But at the same time, we recommend offering free spots to people who need them. I mean, very often I hear this argument that we need to keep entry fees low to keep it accessible. But what that means is that like a whole bunch of people that could be paying more aren't. And then people who like just can't afford it at all still can't afford it.
Right.
So I think if we set like realistic door prices and then make it clear that it's like, if you don't have the money to come to this show, you can do this. This is a policy that I have with all of my shows. Like, no one's going to be turned away for lack of funds.
Yeah.
And then when you say that, then all of a sudden people have the money, you know? It's about what people are choosing to think is worth spending money on. And no one is going to make that argument for us if we don't make that as drag artists. That we need to also convince the audiences who love us that like appreciation and applause is lovely, but it doesn't pay our rent. And because we love doing drag for them, we need them to pay 1 hour's work to help us get some of the way to paying our rent.
Yes. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I think also for those who generally are, let's say, have season tickets to a theater or generally are seeing things in theater, it's somehow easier for them, it seems to me, this could be a misconception, to have drag brought to them in a theater context and sort of legitimized as an art form, or like a sex worker, I think, who also has like, who's presenting his or her art or their art in a theater context, somehow legitimizing this entire silenced, one could say, art form or form of work, than it is for a theater goer to go into a underground club and see a drag show. Or if they do, it's a very, very unusual thing for them to do. And I'm talking about like a regular theater goer who is generally spending their money seeing things in like quote unquote legitimate art spaces. And I wonder if there's a way to kind of help bring those people that do have that money, for whom like 30 euros is nothing, into our spaces. Or is it like, no, actually, we'd rather not have them? I mean, like, I guess I'm trying to think like, how can we get more money into our spaces to fund what we're doing, aside from just trying to convince those who are already doing it that they can afford to pay more?
That's where I think, I mean, my experience of theatre subscribers is that they're the kind of people, well, I'm not going to say that in public. Theatre subscribers are not people who will quietly and calmly accept the revolution. I mean, yeah, subscribers to like state theatres and operas, these people are, when they, in my limited experience, when they see drag in those environments, they don't like it.
Okay.
And I assume it's the same with sex workers. But then I think a lot of the people who really enjoy seeing drag or sex workers in context with money, you know, like state theatres and stuff, are people who are kind of interested in that and are particularly drawn to the fact that there's like something like queer or interesting going on there. Mm-hmm. But I think that these people with money, I think they already are there. Like, I'm not talking about like Nepo babies and rich kids. I mean like people with full-time jobs. Like what we do as like nightlife performers is provide a bit of excitement to people who potentially don't feel like there's that much excitement in their day-to-day professional lives. I think those people are already there.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I know I'm making massive generalizations and trying to...
Oh, I'm all for massive generalizations. I just called theatre subscribers counter-revolutionary. But no, I think that is also, it's also happening. I mean, you've been performing here for like 20 years. When I came here in 2012, it was pretty like accepted to just like not pay drag performers, right?
Yeah.
Like that it's like you show up and we'll give you some drinks.
Oh yeah.
And that has changed like a lot in like 12 years. So I think it's doable for sure.
Great. I think sadly I'm going to kind of have to close it, but I didn't want to actually close it without asking you if you had come with a question you've been busying yourself with that you might want to bring into this conversation.
I mean, maybe it's not a question, but a problem. One of the things that we've seen recently in Germany, like compared to lots of other places, there's like quite, people say generous. I wouldn't say generous. Let's say there has been a situation of relative abundance when it comes to public funding for the arts.
Yeah.
This is like, you know, a social democratic promise we can trace it back to like, you know, the dick measuring contest of the Cold War, where like the Soviet Union and the West are both competing to produce the most like excellent art or whatever. And so they'd get obsessed with weird stuff like, what is it, abstract expressionism or something, and socialist realism. But like, so this funding is part of that Western social democratic model. And one, it's being cut. And then also it's just been shown that it's like how fragile freedom of speech is when the government is the one with its hand on the tap.
Yeah.
You know? So the threat of turning off the tap has really silenced a lot of voices, including mine. It's like put that internal censor into everyone's head and people don't even realize that it's happened, you know? So, I mean, a lot of people realize that it's happened, but there are many that also just think that it's normal that you are quiet about the value of the lives of the children of Gaza because you're worried about how you pay your rent next month or something like that. That's like, you know, that's an obscene situation, right? So as that becomes less tenable, then I'm like, but also you raised a whole bunch of things about like the problem of like supporting a drag practice on, or like a queer nightlife performer practice on ticket sales.
Yeah.
I mean, someone's got to pay for this. Someone's got to pay for us.
Totally.
We're too valuable. And like, I think that remains like an open question because we see in the last like 13 months that like drag performers who are not working with public funds at all have been really vocal, really brave, and really visible when it comes to fighting for democracy and the value of human life in this country. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important part of art. So I guess that's the problem. It's like what to do in such a situation.
It's, absolutely. I mean, maybe we need season ticket subscribers to these clubs. We need patrons. We need rich patrons who live in Brandenburg who actually aren't going to come in to see the show. They just want to make sure that these shows survive. I don't know. I mean,
an interesting idea.
Right? Or we need Patreon for the drag scene as a whole. Or we need sponsorships, but like then it gets into the question of corporations. Do we love corporate sponsorships? Which are the good ones? Yeah, I mean...
It's basically just Ben and Jerry's, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it is really hard. And, you know, some of the censoring is really... there's probably a word for this, but it's cold. Like you don't know that you're even being censored.
Yeah, it's unofficial censorship, yeah.
Yeah, you just haven't been chosen at all. And, you know, you don't quite know why.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I don't know. It's something to really puzzle on.
Well, I think you already presented some interesting things. I think like collective community funding models for drag is like an interesting thing. I'd be curious then to see.
Yeah.
I think you've already inspired me a bit, so that's great.
Great. Maybe we can talk about it in the next meeting. I'm really inspired that DRAG got started. You've just heard from Olympia Bukkakis, Queen of the Heavens and of the Earth, Empress of Despair, and Architect of Your Eternal Suffering. Olympia Bukkakis is a drag queen, choreographer, moderator, and writer living and working in Berlin. She is inspired by the tensions and intersections between queer nightlife and contemporary dance and performance. I'll link more to her and her work in the show notes, as well as to Drag Berlin, Drag Resources Action Group. I'm Mad Kate, and you've been listening to S.W.E.A.T, a series of conversations about performance and performativity of the sexual and sexualized body and work. The theme music was composed by me and features the voice of performer and actress Lori Baldwin. S.W.E.A.T airs every second Tuesday of the month at 13 hours Central European Time on Collaboradio, Free Radios Berlin Brandenburg, broadcasting on 88.4 FM in Berlin, 90.7 FM in Potsdam, and streaming online at fr-bb.org. Afterwards, it's available for streaming wherever you get your podcasts. S.W.E.A.T is a labor of love. If you'd like to support this podcast, it's greatly appreciated. You can do so on my Patreon page. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Thanks so much. Until next time.